I'm set.
You just kind of, thanks a lot.
Good luck.
Yes. We did a bunch of lighthouses. Thursday, so that's additional thing, right? The rest of the time, you might take your I don't know. Yeah, it was nice. I mean, Gloria breakfast on the second day. We really didn't need that much at all. We had like a little, she had a so I had like a function.
Comrades, please take your seats. Let's close the door. It's great to see so many people here. I'm sorry I don't know anything about an overflow room.
You can watch live at facebook.com/Dr. Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein.
You could watch live at
facebook.com/Dr. Jill Stein. That's Dr. Jill Stein.
Dr. Jill Stein, if you want to do that. Or find a comfortable spot. Okay, my panelists ready to have a seat? I think so. Welcome, everyone. My name is Gloria Mattera. Currently, I'm the co-chair of the Green Party of New York State and representative from my state to the National Green Party. I've been a candidate before. I've worked on campaigns, recently deputy campaign manager for Stein Baraka campaign. I've worked in public health in this city for over 20 years, so I've had a big reality check. Today we're going to hear from 4 speakers. I'm going to tell you who they are quickly, and then they will, in the order in which they will speak, so people know that. I also want to say quickly that I am one of the steering committee members of a group called Left Elect, which I'll talk a little bit about later. We'll have someone say a few words about that, but primarily when we had our founding convention in 2015, one of our kind of main goals was to create a dialogue for those who are committed to left electoral system. Our speakers, in order are they coming up? It will be, sorry, I need my glasses for this. Chris Hedges, who's an author, critic, and was a foreign correspondent for nearly 2 decades for a variety of news outlets. His most recent book, Wages of Rebellion, The Moral Imperative of Revolt, will fit in very well here. And he writes online column for Truth Dig. After Chris, we will have Medea Benjamin, the co-founder of the women-led peace group Code Pink and the co-founder of the human rights group Global Exchange. And just to put a plug in for Medea's newest book, Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of the Unjust, Behind the U.S.-Saudi Connection. Then Dr. Jill Stein, who recently was the 2016 Green Party presidential candidate, also the candidate in 2012, a physician and an environmental activist for many years. And then joining us right after she finishes another panel for our 4th speaker will be Margaret Kimberley. Margaret's Freedom Rider column appears weekly in Black Agenda Report and is widely reprinted elsewhere. She maintains a frequently updated blog as well at http://freedomrider.blogspot.com. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
I want to use my 15 minutes to kind of lay out where we are politically. Trump is the symptom. He is not the disease. He is what has been vomited up by a dysfunctional political system that long ago ceased to be democratic and is best characterized, in the words of the political philosopher Sheldon Wolin, as a system of inverted totalitarianism. This is a phrase anyone who's read or heard me speak knows that I use to characterize the system of power. In short, inverted totalitarianism is different from classical forms of totalitarianism in that it is built around the anonymity of the corporate state. It doesn't overthrow a system and replace its symbols and iconography, but presents itself as paying fealty to electoral politics, the Constitution, the iconography and language of American patriotism, yet internally has seized all of the levers of power to render the citizen impotent. And that's where we are. And that's where we have been, I think at this point, arguably for 30 years. Certainly we can go back to Reagan, but it really was accelerated under the Clinton administration with the destruction of the liberal elite and the liberal class. And I wrote a long book on this called The Death of the Liberal Class. But you saw a transformation of our liberal establishment. Remember, Chomsky, I think, has given us the best definition not only of how empire works, but how a liberal class in a capitalist democracy works. It works as a kind of safety valve to ameliorate the and capitalism we saw with the New Deal. And so you can, and as Roosevelt said, Roosevelt was quite frank that his greatest achievement was he saved capitalism. That's what the liberal class does from pressure from radical movements. And then many of you, of course, have read Howard Zinn's great work, The People's History of the United States. That work is a brilliant piece of history on many levels, but one of the most important aspects of that book is that it highlights how undemocratic the American system was when it was created, and how movements, radical movements, were the forces that open up that space. So in the name of anti-communism, certainly accelerated after the 1950s, those radical movements were destroyed. The fact that within the Democratic Party, and I would even have to call out Bernie Sanders, no one will challenge the military state. Seymour Melman at Columbia, another great scholar, he's an economist, read his books on what the military establishment has done to the domestic economy and to the state. One of the many examples he cites is that, for instance, New York City several years ago wanted to buy subway cars. Nobody makes subway cars because they're all making tanks because your cost overruns are covered. They had to buy them from Japan. And so nobody will confront that military complex, which at the end of empire, we are certainly at the end of empire. I studied classics at Harvard, and it resonates. I mean, Trump is Commodus, if anybody knows the end of empire. The guy who had no interest in governing and whose vanity and ego, he's the one who would fix fights in the arena. I mean, just completely out of Trump. They strangled him in his bath eventually. And what happened after is that you saw a reformist emperor. I don't want to make this too cute, but a kind of Bernie Sanders who wanted to take on the military power, and they assassinated him after 3 months. And then the Praetorian Guard just decided that they would give out the emperorship to the highest bidder. That's kind of where we are. We have had certainly for the last 30 years not a naked, but a powerful corporate kleptocracy, and this is the great damage that Bill Clinton did by continuing to speak in that kind of feel your pain language of liberalism and purportedly supporting liberal values, inclusivity, all that kind of stuff, while selling out, beginning with NAFTA, the FCC, welfare, of course. And every time I heard Hillary Clinton talk about women and children, I would think about how they started as a template in Arkansas and then moved on to the federal government, how they sold out single mothers with children. 70% of the original recipients under the welfare program that Bill Clinton killed were children. And so what happened? We created a system, and I covered the war in Yugoslavia. I find many, many echoes of Yugoslavia here. It was more extreme at the end of the 1980s because you had a complete collapse. It was deindustrialization, but a complete and hyperinflation like Weimar. But there was an article today, for instance, on the front page of the New York Times that's worth reading about the violent alt-right, alt-right, and these groups. And just see from these two people were killed and the third was seriously wounded in this hate crime. But I don't take this lightly because I watched exactly the same thing happen in Yugoslavia. Most Yugoslavs did not want their country to be rent apart by violent conflict. But what happens is that the longer paralysis continues, and that's essentially what we're in. We're in a state of stasis. There's no movement, and the deep state has crippled even Trump. I have obviously find Trump as repugnant, and he's like something coughed up out of the Grand Guignol. But the whole kind of framing of this as that he's a stooge of Russia, or that Russia was the one that spun the elections, is an absurdity when you think about it, when you parse it. And let me throw in, because I did hear this kind of talk at the left forum in the past, it is as absurd as the idea that Ralph Nader elected George W. Bush. So look at what they're saying. And of course it's just the media is just bombarding you from the repugnant Rachel Maddow on down. The idea that I guess tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of Hillary Clinton supporters woke up one morning and read the John Podesta emails and said, "That's it, I'm voting for Donald Trump." That's kind of what they're telling you. Or if you read the 7 pages in the Director of National Intelligence report dedicated to RT America, where I have a show, and the power of RT America, which, let's be frank, no one watches, convinced massive numbers of Americans to vote for the Green Party. That's really it. And it is as demagogic as what Trump is doing towards Muslims, but it's demagoguery from the liberal elites. And it doesn't face the fundamental reality. The reason the Democratic Party got shellacked, and not just in the presidential election, is because they betrayed working men and women. They thrust a knife into the back of the working class. And if I hear one more time about the Clintons being a friend of African Americans, I teach in a prison, and I can tell you 80% of my students wouldn't be there but for Bill and Hillary Clinton. No, I'm not joking. Seriously, the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill, what did it do? It exploded the prison population. I was up visiting Mumia Abu-Jamal, our great revolutionary, one of the most courageous figures in America, and one of our most important intellectuals. And he was looking around the room going, none of these people would be here but for the Clintons. And that selling out came with an ideological, a use of traditional liberal terms that became inverted. So, for instance, what did a post-racial America become? It became about a black president who was Cornel West served as a black mascot for Wall Street. What does feminism become? I mean, I come out of Andrea Dworkin, who is a feminist for me and a real one, and Dworkin said that feminism is about empowering oppressed women. It is not about a woman CEO or a woman president. And what's happened, I just finished teaching a semester at Princeton. What's happened in the universities and in the liberal elites, if they have totally bought this mantra that we will color code elitist institutions. Meanwhile, poor people of color and the working class and will be thrown under the bus. And that's precisely what's happened. I just want to end by talking a little bit about the white working class, which is a line behind Trump, which is angry, racist, xenophobic. All of these things are true. However, the pain of the white working class is real, and it's legitimate. And we are going to have to begin to build bridges to people who think differently than us and perhaps even say things that we disagree with. I come from rural Maine, and I can assure you many of my relatives, who I love very much, there were things that came out of their mouth that were highly inappropriate. They were poor, lower-class workers. And my rule was, you can say whatever you want when you go home, but you can't say that in front of me. But I still love you, and I care about you. And we have to, and I think Nader has been pushing this, and Nader is right, we have to begin to organize, and we're going to have to build, we're going to have to align ourselves or build movements, because at this point, I think it's good that we, run a Green Party candidate. I'm all for it, but I think at this point it is. I gave a talk on Gramsci last night. It is kind of like Gramsci trying to organize the Communist Party under Mussolini's fascism. They put so many roadblocks in that it's. Trotsky actually writes a lament for Gramsci for trying to do this. And I think that we're going to have to begin to find our strength by building a consensus around issues that people care about within their communities that are in many ways seen as apolitical but are not apolitical. That is raising the minimum wage. That is blocking fracking from destroying your water system. That is stopping Betsy DeVos from destroying your public schools. And it is going to come through acts of mass civil disobedience. And there is Ralph Pointer, who's led the life we should all lead, doing it. I don't think you ever got arrested for resisting arrest. I think you got arrested for assaulting police officers. Am I right about that, Ralph? Not the same thing. Don't believe that. That guy was a boxer in Pittsburgh. So, but I think that's it. And they're going to get nasty and they're going to get rough because the Democratic Party is not going to change. They are wedded. Schumer. As an alternative, and we saw with the 200 protesters at the inauguration, they are going to come down. We saw it with the brave water resistors and water defenders and Standing Rock. It's going to be dirty and it's going to be ugly, but it's the fight of our lives because, frankly, if we don't change this system as a species, we're not going to be here. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I'd like us all to practice comradeship and community. So one will be, because there are so many people in this room, if you will have a question or a comment for any of the panelists, please write it down. I'm going to ask my Green Party comrade, Jack Baldwin, in the back, and Linda Thompson right here in the front, in addition to me, for you to pass it down or help people pass it down. And I will also say, look around the room. If there are comrades in this room that look like they need a seat but they don't have one, please offer it to them.
So I want to follow up on a number of the things that Chris brought up. And when we're looking at, do we need a new party or can we work within the system, I just want to talk a bit from experience. I moved to Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago because Barack Obama got into office and I thought, now we can really change things. Laughter. And a lot of us have tried really hard, and certainly there were some things that changed. On the international level, I think a great win was the Iran nuclear deal, and that's something that we should really be fighting hard to keep in place. On the international level, there was also the opening with Cuba, which is something that was decades in coming too late, but came finally, not enough. But for the most part, it was business as usual. And for the work that I was doing, it was so disheartening to see the way that the Democrats worked so hard to prop up the empire. When you did, I wrote this book recently on Saudi Arabia because, you know why I did it actually? Because every year I would go out to AIPAC, the Israel lobby, and we would be out there fighting with these people going into AIPAC, literally getting beaten up every single year by the people going into AIPAC, and the police would never protect us. I'm Jewish, so other Jewish people going into AIPAC would say, "Why don't you do something about those Arab regimes? Why are you always picking on Israel?" So I thought, maybe there's some truth to that, And I started researching and doing work around Saudi Arabia. And it was amazing to me to find that not only has the U.S., since the 1930s, the time that the Saudi Empire was created, been supporting this regime, but it was really under Obama that they became the #1 purchaser of U.S. weapons. Under Obama. 42 separate weapons deals under Obama. Did the Republicans say, oh, why are we giving to this horrible, Arab, Wahhabist, intolerant, misogynist regime that's spreading terrorism around the world? No, they were all for weapons sales. Did the progressive Democrats stand up and say, why are we giving to this misogynist, intolerant, blah, blah, blah? Not at all. And so you saw both parties doing the most unthinkable thing if that was extremist ideology that forms the foundation of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And so even today, when Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, and all of a sudden some Democrats are saying, ooh, what's he doing selling all these weapons to the Saudis? The majority of them in Congress, they have the right, 30 days after weapons deal is announced, to stand up and say no to that deal. You know how hard it is for us to get even the majority of the progressive caucus in Congress to say no to weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, because not only is it supporting this repressive regime internally, but because they're using the weapons to decimate the people of Yemen. Absolute catastrophe what's going on in Yemen, and we can't even get the majority of progressive Democrats to say no. Now that is shameful. That is absolutely unacceptable. Example, and I see my comrade here, Ariel Gold from Code Pink, who does our Israel-Palestine work, because she is braving going into Congress to try to get them to do the simplest thing that you can imagine. There's the whole thing, progressive and everything but Palestine. Well, it's you can't find people in Congress who are good on Palestine. And she had to work from October of last year until May to get one person in Congress to stand up and say they would initiate a letter. It's just a letter. It's not even a bill. Saying that the Gandhi of Palestine, Issa Amro, known as the Gandhi of Palestine because he is supportive and definitive about using non-violent tactics. He has been given awards around the world. He's recognized by the European Union. He's brought here actually by the State Department. He says he is facing 18 charges in a military court that has over 99% conviction rate. And we are trying to get somebody in Congress to stand up and say to Tillerson, maybe the Israelis should reconsider this. That's what they're asking for. It took months to get somebody to do it, and our goal is to get 25 members of Congress. 25. You know how many members of Congress we have, right? 435. We want to get just 25 to sign on to this letter. And that will be an incredible victory if we get those 25. That's how pathetic it is. That's how horrible it is. That's how awful these Democrats are. And so, of course, we need a new party. Of course we need a new party. Now, the question and the discussion, I think, is, what is that party? Is it the Green Party? And we certainly have a fabulous representative of the Green Party right here. Is it another party, a new party? Is it a coalition of parties? I don't know. I think it's an important discussion to have. But when I look at Europe and I look at other places around the world, I see new parties in with fresh ideas. I just say that we need something outside the two-party system, and that is for sure. What do we do in the meantime? We support the parties, the independent, the non-mainstream parties that do exist. What else do? We create more coalitions of coalitions. We create more networks that we can have both people involved in politics. Those coalitions have to form. I might be a minority in this room, but I also think we have to work with people who call themselves and consider themselves progressive Democrats. Because I think a lot of those people have many of the same values that we do, and we do need to work with them. I also think, see, there's some of us in the room. Didn't get a thunderous applause there, but I got a couple. I also think that when Chris said about civil disobedience, we are not doing enough to show our opposition. I love marches. I go to marches all the time. I say a protest today keeps the doctor away. I'm always going to protest. But let me tell you, walking around on a Saturday and a Sunday in a circle, coming back to the same place you started when everything else is closed, that's really not like super impactful. So I would much rather see 100 people going into Congress and doing a sit-in in the lobby of the Hart Building and taking it over that building. So raise your hand if you have done civil disobedience for justice here in this room. So that should be everybody. And I would say now under Trump, it has to be all of us in this room and a whole lot more. Final points I want to make. One is that our wins are going to be on the local level, but we have so much, not only has the right taken over the White House and the Congress, but look at 2/3 of the governorships, look at 2/3 of the legislatures, look at so many of the courts on the local level. Where are we? We have not done nearly enough. We can name a couple of cities. We can name some, successes that we have at the local level, but we have to do much, much more at electing progressives at the local level, at doing good coalition building at the local level, at forcing city councils to pass resolutions from $15 an hour to sanctuary cities to say hell no to another $54 billion for the Pentagon. Whatever, those kinds of things, we have to have more and more of those that we're forcing our city councils and our mayors to do. And I think also we have to, while we are taking down this system, we have to be building up the alternatives. And I'm so glad that there are so many sessions here at the Left Forum that talk about everything from worker co-ops to credit unions to public banks and all of the pieces that we're creating of a new economy. But there is also the way that we live. I always thought that living in a nuclear family was kind of a silly way to live. But we have not created enough alternatives where we really have different lifestyles that are so appealing for people that no matter what their ideology is, they want to come and be in our alternative lifestyles. And it is beautiful to see out of so much of the problems in places like Detroit, those kinds of things popping up with beautiful urban gardens, with communities coming together. I'm spending more time like kids and gentrification and has turned it into a farm. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be and feel part of community. So we need these kind of things to keep us together, what we at Cold Pink call the local peace economy. And finally, what I want to say is that it sometimes gets very hard working in the left because it feels sometimes like a circular firing squad. And we are constantly backbiting each other. We are constantly saying that somebody is not politically correct enough or doesn't do this enough or whatever it is. You know what we need in our movement? We need a lot more kindness. We need a lot more gentleness. We need to be a lot more loving with each other, tolerant of each other. Chris said that he has relatives who are Trump supporters. I have lots of relatives who are Trump supporters. Every time I come to New York and stay with them, it's Trump supporters. I love them as well, and I work with them and I talk to them. But within even our non-Trump supporters, our community, we have to be much, much, much kinder to each other. So those are my final words. It's with love and with kindness that we will build a much stronger movement. Thank you.
So it's really great to be here and to see this room really full. How many were here for this event, this panel 1 year ago? This same kind of panel with many of us on it. And you know, it was a very different world a year ago.
Yeah.
And there was so much hope and energy and effort that was being put into the Democratic Party. No offense, but there was a great, there was a great hope out there that the Democratic Party was finally going to do it for us. And some of us did not share that point of view. That's what that panel was about a year ago. And as we approached this date, Linda and I sort of said, you know, how can we let this day come again and not take a look back and not think about, did we learn anything from that experience? Yes, it's very important that we respect each other. It's very important that we be kind with each other, but it's also very important that we recognize that the clock is ticking. And this is kind of a Hail Mary moment right now. What we went through with Bernie Sanders, many people went through with Barack Obama. Many people went through with Dennis Kucinich. Many people went through with Jesse Jackson. Many people went through with the realignment campaign. Anybody old enough to remember the realignment campaign in the 1960s, which was where labor and the civil rights movement, two incredibly powerful movements of our time, focus, energy, and create a social democratic type Democratic Party. And you know what floundered, what that movement floundered on? The war in Vietnam. Because if you were not a supporter of the war in Vietnam, you did not have the credibility to actually critique the Democratic Party. So here we are with fascism rising up a lot of places, very much in response to the neoliberalism, violence, and Bill Clinton who deregulated Wall Street. It was Barack Obama who bailed it out to the tune of trillions of dollars while allowing Main Street to basically collapse. We are really at the end of the road on the environment. I was reminded today of a study that came out several months ago from the World Wildlife Fund that half of the world's wildlife is gone. Half is gone just since 1970. You can imagine what it was going back a century. You know, we really are at the Hail Mary moment here, and we can't keep doing what we've been doing on nuclear weapons. You know, we are perhaps at one of the most dangerous moments ever, where the Russians are moving their mobile intermediate range missiles with nuclear capacity up to the border because they've been surrounded by our missiles and our nuclear weapons over the past many decades,
and NATO for that matter, which promised it would not move 1 inch to the east of Germany at the time of German reunification. And the Russians, as you may remember from your history, have been invaded a few times, lost, just a staggering number of people with the invasion of the Germans and from Napoleon before that. So the Russians get a little bit defensive about being surrounded by missiles and nuclear warheads. And here we are, in the midst of a new, a new neo-McCarthyism, a new Red Scare, a new Russia baiting. What do we hear constantly out of Rachel Maddow and MSNBC? How the Russians are responsible for basically all the evils of the world. And, this is not to say that the Russians are the good guys in white hats, hardly. But rather that we are making a beeline here towards oblivion, including with our nuclear weapons. And if we were engaging in Syria, as Hillary Clinton, for example, wanted us to do with a no-fly zone and be shooting down Russian airplanes, would we even be here today? I don't know. Trump is horrific. And right now I am being misquoted all over the place by MSNBC. I don't know if anybody's seeing these tweets and Rachel Maddow's ravings. But, I am being said to be responsible, actually, for all of this. Really, and I am so honored to be considered that powerful.
At least you're finally getting some news coverage.
Well, you're not kidding. And in fact, I now have an invitation to go on to CNN and defend myself tomorrow night. So, finally, I get to shout back. But it's been incredible. The nuclear issue is really serious. It cannot be overstated. And, that nuclear clock is like 2 minutes a minute now. According to the Soviet Union, we are at the most dangerous nuclear moment ever. And again, on climate, Jim Hansen, the foremost climate scientist probably in the world, who has never been wrong yet, is saying that it could be as soon as 2060. Got that? Not a century from now, not 1,000 years from now, but as soon as 2060. Not 2 feet of sea level rise, but 10, 20, or 30 feet of sea level rise at the rate that the ice sheets are collapsing. So, in my view, Donald Trump is not the one to be afraid of, nor is Rachel Maddow and MSNBC, or Hillary Clinton for that matter. What we have to be afraid of is not standing up and taking our destiny back into our own hands, because we are the only ones who will save us. And I think in the same way you can say kindly and gently to a friend who is trapped in an abusive personal relationship that we got a problem here with the Democratic Party. And that this faith in the Democratic Party, the defense of the Democratic Party, is really contrary to a reality check. And that was what we had in mind when we talked, what I had in mind when we thought about calling this a reality check. A reality check about where do we stand in terms of our survival, in terms of fascism, the hope that democracy will survive, that our planet will survive, that our economy will survive, that racial justice will somehow, be resurrected out of our prison system and out of our drug wars and out of the battered economies of the African American communities, not just in this country but all around the world. We've got a critical problem here, and we're not going to get out of here by running through the same paces. And for those who continue to put their hope and faith in the Democratic Party, I think, in the same way, if you had a friend in an abusive relationship and their life is at risk, it's really important. You owe it to them to at least have a gentle discussion. And, you can't take people where they're not going to go, but you do owe them an honest discussion and just an honest sharing. And I think any accounting of the facts here is that we can't keep doing what we've been doing. And I think that means, that doesn't make it easy. It's not easy to develop a new political party. And let me say that, the Green Party I see as sort of the foundation because it is a national party. If you have not been involved in establishing a new national party, then you have a very rude awakening about what it is like to establish a new political party in the context of 21st century America. Everything is tilted against you. It is not easy, but we do have a very hard-won foundation, which is open. It's open for joining, for discussion, even for, a new name, if we had to entertain. I find so often this boils down to the name. Because I'd say 5 years that our agendas have come together. We've been working together with the other socialist, progressive, peace and freedom parties. And it's hard to find the difference in terms of our agendas. There may be small differences about strategy and tactics, but those get smaller by the day. So I think this is a really good news story, that we have a springboard, we really have a perfect storm, and in fact we really have no alternative. That is the only way forward in which we are going to get out of here alive. And it's happening much faster than any of us would have dreamed, for better and for worse. And I think Donald Trump, in an odd and ironic way, Donald Trump is sort of the silver lining that makes us see, as Chris was saying, he is the symptom, he is not the disease, he is the product. Remember, most people who voted for Donald Trump were not voting for him. This was shown by many studies. They weren't for him, they were against what the Democrats have to offer, which tells us more of the neoliberal agenda. And we saw, both by the sabotage of Bernie Sanders, we saw by what happened at the DNC, where the reform agenda was beaten back. The ban on corporate funding was defeated, where Keith Ellison was defeated because Barack Obama created a candidate to oppose him and to push him back. And then, if that wasn't enough, then the California Democratic Party, like 3 weeks ago, also defeated their progressive reform candidate in the one state that really had the best organized progressive movement within the Democratic Party. How much longer are we going to wait? We got 2 feet over the cliff. We are in a free fall. If we get out and we organize in a social movement as well as in a political movement, we can take our future back. We can create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. We have the power to create that world. If we don't do it, no one will. I hope you will be a part of that fight. Thank
you. So with perfect timing, Margaret Kimberley has joined us. I'm going to remind people to please pass your questions and comments down to me, up to Jack there, down to Linda. Ask people to pass it down for you. We really appreciate that.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. This is an interesting time, if nothing else. We're living in a time of great contradiction. Trump symbolizes many of those. But the world is he's president because of these crises. The crisis of legitimacy, which delegitimized elite consensus, which is why they go on and on about fake news, because people are clearly, for many reasons, not believing it anymore. But the crisis is economic. The capitalist system is under great stress. It provides fewer and fewer benefits to the masses of people. It's on its last legs, but that is also what makes it so dangerous. And it explains everything from the Brexit vote to the heightened imperialist imperative. It explains the whipped-up frenzy of Russophobia and the attacks on a right-wing president by the elites and by the deep state. Ever since Trump took the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement 2 days ago, and we've been hearing a lot of, and we should, about the danger of environmental collapse and even mass extinction. But at the same time, I think we need to point out that this Paris Agreement was not everything that we were told that it was. Of course, I don't agree with Trump that climate change is a hoax. I don't think having a green economy is going to hurt the economy or hurt workers. But it's also true that the accord was a ruse by which the rich countries gave the appearance of doing something about climate change when they were not. Just to mention just one problematic aspect of the agreement, it actually permitted the world temperature to rise even more. So here we are, we're trying to escape all the traps and all the contradictions that go along with them. The political trap that we live with here in the United States is this two-party duopoly of the Republicans and the Democrats. And what we have in essence is one far-right party and one center-right party. And the system is set up to exclude third parties or to relegate them to irrelevancy or even spoiler status. I personally know people who want to vote green, but they were afraid to. But these people, they don't need convincing. They know the Democrats do very little on our behalf. For black voters, the choices are particularly stark. We're in this trap within a trap because our system always has, historically, one party is the party for white people. And for the past 50 years, that's been Republicans. So we're very risk averse, so much so that most black people would not think about supporting Bernie Sanders. There was a fairly large cohort of younger people, younger generations were more willing. But in general, and I don't believe that's because people hated him or anything, there was just this fear to stick with the tried and true and defeat the Republicans, which didn't happen anyway. But so here we are. So what do we do on the left at this moment? But I not to oversimplify, because this is all very complicated and difficult, but I think it's important just to be on the left. No prefixes. People want to be alt-left. Somebody told me about pop left. I'm like, just left. Just leave it alone. Did I do that?
Someone leaning against the light, maybe? Dimmer switch?
Yeah, open the door so you can see
what you're doing. What about the other side? The Russians did it.
It's a very dramatic. But now we have okay. What a dramatic moment for me. So at any rate, where was I? Yes, White People's Party. So Democrats are seen as the only game in town that keep the even worse barbarians outside of the gate. And I say that we should just assert our leftness despite the challenges presented by the duopoly. And I don't think we should shrink from hurting a party which already has hurt itself and which needs, frankly, to be hurt some more. So Trump's victory presents us with an opportunity. On election night, when it was about 10:30 Eastern Time, and I realized, oh my God, she's going to lose, I had to rewrite like many other people, I had to rewrite my Black Agenda column. But her defeat was actually, when I think about it, not surprising. This was a culmination of years of Democratic Party losses. The last success was 2008. Obama sweeps in with Democratic control of the House and the Senate. But their only signature achievement, and the one thing that everybody shoved in your face if you dared question them, Obamacare, what about Obamacare? Which could be gotten rid of anyway. And I'm not going to say it didn't do anything. It was especially important in those states that accepted the Medicaid funding. But it also enshrined reliance on the for-profit system, which is the cause of all our healthcare problems. And so most voters want Medicare for all. That's what people want. There's no mystery to how the Democrats can win again. Raise the minimum wage. They raised it, they controlled everything. It could have been what they wanted it to be. And they raised it 70 cents an hour, I believe it was. Card check. Does anybody remember card check? Well, if you don't remember, it's okay because it didn't happen. And so the last victory was Obama's re-election. And they've gone on to lose more and more and more across the country. And it's clear that their only plan is to win the presidency and cut deals with Republicans. And for that meager effort, we're told to be grateful. And then, of course, they couldn't even get that right. So when and inevitably we are, always, asked about lesser evilism. Well, first of all, the Democrats can't even win anymore. So it's hard to be the lesser evil when you can't even get into office and do a little bit. So at this point, supporting them for that reason is selling your soul literally for nothing at all. We do have to, yes, acknowledge how our system diminishes the role of third parties, but I say put the Democrats out of their misery. We could be the second party. And they can provide the illusion of working on our behalf. So, but here we are since November, and they're not going quietly. There's been very little discussion of the analysis of Trump's victory. We're told Vladimir Putin is to blame, unless he told Hillary Clinton, you got Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, you don't have to show up. So unless he did that, you can't blame him. The FBI director, Comey, I believe, was covering himself because he knew she was in serious legal jeopardy. But I believe things had already been settled, frankly, by that time. So the Democrats are the problem themselves, and they've lived off this undeserved reputation for years and years. And the less and less they do, the fewer votes they get. And they don't give people what they want because they're captured by corporate interests. So if you provide Medicare for all, you don't get the money from Big Pharma and the insurance companies. If you advocate for a higher minimum wage, then that costs big business money, and that's why they don't do it. They hope that Republicans will be unpopular, or we'll just tell people how bad Trump is, and then we can get back in. But they wouldn't even go through the motions of supporting some part of Bernie Sanders' policy. Jill referenced the DNC chairmanship race, and Keith Ellison, who instead of supporting him, and just to be politically cynical, say, well, we'll make it look like we're doing something for Bernie's people. Nope. They went and found Tom Perez and created this candidacy so he could try to keep selling what people weren't buying. But that is why we are where we are now. The bloom was already off the rose. And but despite having raised $1 billion, am I the only one who says, if you have $1 billion, how do you lose? Has anybody else had that thought? What was she paying for? Nobody, they had some logarithm or algorithm which said, you got this state, you got that state, you don't have to go. Anyway, but so here we are now, so Trump. The elephant in the room, the guy who, it's hard, you can't ignore him when he's, when he's not shoving the president of Montenegro, he's got tweets with typos and his dumb son-in-law's running foreign policy. There's always something, and you can't take your eyes off of him, and it's hard for him to be ignored. But he's going to be the president until January 2021. I don't think he's going to be impeached. The Republicans would have to be the ones who want to do that. He'd have to be a true liability to them. And I don't think the Democrats want him. They want to run against him. And he's their fundraising and vote-getting poster child. But so here we are again, where we were in 2001. And as I've said, we need to be unapologetic about where we are and keep building our movement. And it's time, I spoke of crises, but creating a crisis is also a good thing. That is how movements are successful. If you think about the 60s and the liberation, the so-called people lived in the South and could not vote. This is what a mass movement can do. And it was, it's hard. It's been a long time since people have seen this in action. So it will be difficult, but not impossible. And there was no compromise as there is now. There was debate. Should we confront Lyndon Johnson? He's already done so much for us. People wanted to confront Dr. King. There were differences in strategy. But there was always somebody who did it. And no one just said it's a lesser evil or you can't say anything about this one or that one. People stepped forward. And that is what we have to keep doing now. So, but it's been a long time, as I said. And now that all that energy, the environmental movement, Nixon did not create the EPA because he wanted to. There was a huge movement. A huge campaign against Congress members called the Dirty Dozen, and a lot of them lost. And he got the message, and we got an EPA. So those are the things that we have to remember about what we did and what other people did before us. So here we are with Trump, but I think it's important not to be fooled. You know, it's unfortunate that presentation is everything. And Obama could deport people, but he's Obama and very polished. And he's nice to his wife in public, and he's not pushing anybody around or doing anything crazy. So we accept, wouldn't it be nice if we had him again? But I don't know what the substantive, I'm not saying there are no substantive differences, but there aren't enough for people to just fold their tents and act as though the Democrats, that we should want them to be back in office. And I'd like to talk about something else, I know my time is short, about election integrity, about voter suppression. Hillary Clinton lost key states, I'm sure of it, because of voter suppression. But she has said nothing about, she finally did a couple days ago. She and other Democrats, the Congressional Black Caucus, have said nothing about that. And John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, civil rights icon, I don't know how you get designated that, but he said Trump was not the legitimate president, and when asked why, did he say it was because of voter suppression? No. Did he say it's because of voter ID laws? No. Did he say it's because of the Electoral College? Nope. He said it's because of Russia. And he and the rest of the Congressional Black Caucus don't even talk about black people anymore. So this is where we are now, and that, I believe, makes the case for not apologizing by cutting them loose and by working together, by running candidates for office. I don't think we really have a choice. We live in a world where 8 billionaires have as much money as half the poor people, something like that. And the climate crisis, which is real and severe, which is going to continue even if the United States stayed in around and stay the course and keep doing what we've been doing. Thank you so much.
Thanks to our panelists. We'll hear a little bit more from them before we end. But while you're passing your questions down, Linda Thompson's just going to take a minute to tell you a little bit about Left to Left.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by taking a little poll. How many people here would like a third mass working class party? Okay. Okay. Now, second question. How many people are actively trying to build one? Okay, that's about a quarter of the people who want it. You're not the only ones who want one. Years ago, there was an AARP poll which said incredibly, that about 70% of people in the United States want a third party. And yet here we are without one. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that the left has lost confidence in itself. We have been brainwashed to believe that we cannot do it. So Left Elect came into being to begin that discussion of not just dreaming about one, not just talking about one, but beginning to not build, but lay the basis for building a third party. And what we did was draw together all the independent campaigns left of the Democratic Party around the country, and it was a very broad coalition that came into being, including socialists, the Green Party, people who ran on their own as independents, and we held a conference in Chicago in May of 2015. And let me tell you, for having a coalition of left parties and individuals, it was a wonderfully collaborative affair. And people were working together. There were deep discussions exploring this dilemma that we find ourselves in of not having this mass party that we so badly need in this country. So that is what Left Elect is about. I'm going to put sign-up sheets on the end of these tables so you can, yes, we'll put this over here.
I need a little help with the microphone, sorry, because we're supposed to move it to the table for the...
Okay. All right. So anyway, there are two things coming up that we want to look to. There's democracy out, and it's going to be dealing with instant runoff voting, which is the key dilemma that we face. A lot of you know that, but we have to begin to deal with it. And what I want to encourage you all to get on our mailing list, to sign up, and begin to collaborate with us on laying the basis for this mass party. The Green Party certainly deserves the support of the entire left. It may not be the final solution. There may be coalitions that come into being that will make it broader than that, but it's certainly part of the answer. So,
I'm really sorry we're over time, and I need to give the panel an opportunity and people in. Thank you. Pass the sign-ups that Linda put out here around the room. I have not read these questions before, so I'm just going to try and pick them and read them. So. This is for the whole panel. Do you support the foundation of a new independent political party of working people? And we'll have anybody on the panel who wants to answer. Well, could you repeat the question? Yes.
For dramatic effect.
Right.
Yes.
It's does the panel support a new independent political party of working people? That's something we talked a lot about in Left Forum for many years.
We definitely need a new force, and I think we have the basis for building that out of our current formations. And I think the reality is that the Green Party has a national base, and we have other strong socialist and left parties that have local bases, and I don't think the name of the game here is throwing it out like we need something new. Let's forget about everything we've done till now, because there is a myth out there that there's some fatal flaw in our existing work. That fatal flaw is the system, this very toxic system, which will poison any opponent, any
opposition party or opposition force, we will all be dragged through the mud. We will all be smeared. We will all be natorized and all the rest. So this is not about disavowing the progress that's been very hard won. It's about recognizing we need to get out of the corporate-controlled tools of oligarchy, and we need to get together among the independent, non-corporate political parties that are of, by, and for the people. When we put that together, that will be unstoppable.
I would just say that a party is not a club. And there are certainly segments of the Green Party that function as clubs. By which I mean you have, and I've seen them, and are top down. And I think if the structure of the Green Party is to be amplified and perhaps even rejuvenated, those kind of ossified clubs have to be broken, and they have to be infused with people who come out of movements, especially people of color. The Green Party is far too white. And people are...
Well, and I would also say, having run myself for the Green Party, that we put far too much energy in the top tiers of running and far little energy in the local city councils and the school boards and the places where independents can win, and we can show what we can do on the local level and show the party as one that really gets things done. So I would just go for a lot more of the local organizing.
And if I can just quickly add that the vast preponderance of the party's work is at the local level, but you will not hear about it. Regrettably, we have to run at the higher level in order to maintain ballot status. So we are forced to do this, and regrettably, that is what the media pays attention to. But our effort, is much like that of the socialist Eugene V. Debs, who ran repeatedly at the national level and helped galvanize the victories of socialist and progressive party candidates at the level of school boards and mayors and city councils and even governors. There is a sort of an ironic interplay between the visibility that you can get as a national campaign and then the power that you can organize at the local level. But it's not easy to do any of it in this day and age, and we will only get the party that we deserve by getting out and getting involved and making it so. Thank you.
I want to move on to as many questions as we can. Should the left compromise to prevent another couple of state legislatures falling under Republican control to avoid a Koch-led constitutional convention, calcifying austerity, and anti-environmental policies barring real revolution? So, summing up, should the left compromise and not let the Republicans take any more state legislatures?
I'm not sure how the left compromising has anything to do with that. The Democrats are the ones with the money. They are the ones who let this happen. So I'm not sure that that's a question to put to us. I suppose it is the question, should we work with the Democrats to keep the Republicans from taking over these seats? I guess we can, but you have to make demands. It should not just be, oh, yeah, we're so scared, we're going to help you. No, there should be, compromise implies that there's been discussion and debate and demands being made. So I would say yes, but it should not just be, allow ourselves to be treated like doormats in the name of being loyal.
And Margaret, here's a question for you. How do you know Hillary Clinton lost the election when exit polls show she won in swing states with electronically counted blacks?
The way these votes are counted is very mysterious. We can't, we don't have proof of how people voted. The exit polls are not themselves proof, so we can't be certain. But we are certain that people are being kept from the polls. People are being denied the ability to vote, and this is a national scandal. For years, we've had black neighborhoods not get the same number of voting machines or get worse voting machines. And then it's voter ID laws. Then there's this, is it called cross-check, where they say if there's a Margaret Kimberley in New York and one in New Jersey, they say, well, one of them's a fraud and this person loses their right to vote. So that is what we do know. And we do know that the Democratic Party doesn't care about it at all, doesn't care about the votes of their most loyal constituency.
There was an effort to recount the vote and ask that question specifically, and the answer we got to that effort to recount that vote was, don't you dare, how dare you even raise the question. I think, we need a unified movement for voting justice. And it's about ending voter suppression. It's about ending the disenfranchisement of felons. It's about ending interstate cross-check and voter IDs, and ending the use of these hack-friendly, tamper-friendly, error-prone electronic voting machines. We deserve a paper ballot, which is hand-marked and hand-counted. It's not rocket science. Over and over you find these issues are not rocket science. It is about our having a strong and powerful, unified movement that will not give up.
I'm a Puerto Rican Dominican American, and I'm convinced that the Green Party and non-establishment progressive Democrats can best help my community. What can be done to convince Latino voters to vote for the politicians that really care about them?
Well, it's quite remarkable how much the Democratic politicians kept talking to people in the immigrant rights movement under Obama and just said, give it a little more time, give us a little more time, a little more time. In the meantime, he deported over 2 million people. So I think it started to become very evident to leaders in the immigrant rights movement that Obama and the Democrats were not their friends. Now suddenly when it's Trump in office, they act like they are the great supporters of the immigrant community. But I think a lot of the leadership of the immigrant community knows better from having experienced for so many years what happened before Trump, and are really with us in wanting something new and different.
On the federal level, what about brand new Congress, a tactical strategy using the institutionalized power of privilege, but primarily taking the power that the two parties have?
It doesn't work like that because the primaries are fixed. You saw it with Sanders. For instance, by the way, the taxpayers pay for the primaries. We pay for them, and then these two blood-sucking parties run them. And so what do? They deny, the Democratic Party will deny independents from voting in certain primaries, which of course swung it to Clinton. We're of course just beginning from the whole dark money, corporate money. She would have never been the candidate without that money. And then they do things like steal the Nevada caucus. I think it's pretty clear that was stolen from Sanders. So this would begin with a presumption that somehow the primary process was fair, and it's rigged.
I don't think that's always the case, and I think it's good to make those challenges. When you see that a couple of people like Pramila Jayapal from Washington State, the Seattle area, or you see Jamie Raskin from Maryland, these were people who fought hard in primaries, didn't have the backing of the establishment Democratic Party, and won. And they make a big difference. Having just some real Congress people in Congress who care about the grassroots, who come from the grassroots, who have connections to the grassroots, makes a big difference.
About using the primary system, so I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. It basically talks about, the great accomplishment running in the primaries and using states that allow cross endorsement. And so I'm going to answer that question right now. Being the chair of the Green Party in New York, where we are one of the few states that have fusion. Fusion, as Howie Hawkins would say, breeds confusion. Using fusion in just a very small states basically decreases the voter choice. And as we know, there are fake parties here in New York. I don't know if any other states can claim that, but I would say that that is not really a tactic to show any independent political power. I offer if the other panelists have anything to say about that, but it's kind of dear to my heart, so It was a very long, hard to read question. But if people have more questions, please continue to pass them down. Is it possible to have a third party to take power in our current winner-take-all? First past the post system, and is there any way to have a national movement for ranked choice voting?
So, I think it is, the prospects of taking power are far greater at the local level. And I think it makes most sense to focus most efforts there at the local level. What's happening in Maine right now is very instructive. In Maine, they passed voting, and now they find it, and in the process of trying to repeal it as we speak. Same thing happened in Massachusetts about 18 years ago. We passed campaign finance reform, and we passed public financing by a voter referendum overwhelmingly. And then the Democratic legislature, in progressive Massachusetts, the Democratic legislature repealed public financing of our elections on a voice vote, which is what persuaded me that if we want to get these basic democracy changes on which everything else depends, we need a political revolution. And I mean both in terms of the party and the vehicle, as well as what our goals and our objectives are. And I would love to be persuaded otherwise, but my experience as an organizer and as a political animal, which didn't start until the age of 50 years old. I was strictly a social movement person. I came to this very late in life, and I really got tricked into it and discovered that, wow, there was a very powerful conversation that people were really hungry to have. And in my experience, nothing else was working. Might as well try electoral struggle. But in my 20 years of experience now in that electoral struggle, I wish I could be persuaded that we get somewhere inside the Democratic Party. I just keep seeing us take significant steps and then get shot down, and then get shot down, and then get shot down. And it makes me allergic to trying to work within that system. And it makes me very impatient and to say, we're out of time, folks. This is it. We're out of time. It's the Hail Mary moment now. We got to go for the gold. We got to do what we want to do, and that's not just electorally. It means we also need to build towards the general strike, and we need to come together as multiple movements. We need to align our calendars so that we are all locking down. We are all going on boycott. We are all sitting in. We can have many forms of this general strike, and hopefully we'll persuade the transportation workers to be a part of it, which is what makes it powerful. But I think we need new tactics, and we need to step it up, because we're making a beeline for oblivion right now, and we're going to decide whether there will be a future or not.
So in the effort of transparency, I was given a clarification about the last question that I raised, so I will read it. They meant to use the primary publicity and debate process to expose the election fraud and then run as well, which I assume then you mean third party or Green Party, in the general election. So, but that's only in very few states, obviously, and if anybody wants to answer that question or have any comment about it. But it won't happen in New York, in the Green Party. We have a rule against that.
Not true.
The Green Party has a rule against cross-endorsing. I said it won't happen in New York in the Green Party, but it can happen.
You can run in any major party primary, and as well in the general election, as long as there's no.
Well, they're kind of like in the weeds board of election stuff around that. Yes. What the National Progressive Political Party do with electronic voter purges and electronic election theft, determining election outcomes, and do other progressive parties, I guess this was for Jill, agree in the need for transparent vote counts? We can move on. Okay, read the right, backed by corporations, is very close to being able to hold an Article 5 convention. How do we stop this? And if they are able to do it, our civil rights are gone. No thoughts on
that? You think you have civil rights? When the state watches you 24 hours a day, stores all of your electronic communications, photographs you God knows how many times a day, that you can't use the word liberty. That is the relationship between a master and a slave. Habeas corpus, due process. I tell you, I've taught several hundred people in prison. I could probably count on two hands the number who actually had a trial. The NDAA, Section 1021, overturning the 1878 Quasi Comitatus Act, which had prohibited using the military as a domestic police force, the right of the executive branch to assassinate American citizens. And you look at how the court systems have been twisted through SAMs, Special Administration Procedures, where you can be tried for what you believe, not for what you did. That's what Fahad Hashmi was tried for. You can be tried under SAMs where you're not even allowed to see the evidence because it's classified, courtesy of Ronald Reagan. You can have no contact with anyone except limited contact with your lawyer, and your lawyer can't speak about the psychological and physical conditions which are called torture that you're under, including down here down in the jail down in, what's the name of the jail down there?
Rikers.
Not Rikers, the other one.
Attica?
Huh?
Attica?
Yeah, the MCC. So, I mean, this idea that we have rights, we've pretty much been stripped of most of our rights, including the right of our vote. We can engage in the political theater, the political charade, but as soon as these people get to Washington, who writes the legislation? K Street. It's all the lobbyists, and we talk about people in primaries. We're all friends with Dennis Kucinich. You know, Kucinich was not allowed to sit with the Democratic caucus. He was treated like a leper out there, and I was out there in front of the Cannon building when we were calling for impeachment of Bush. I mean, so I think we have to have, and this is what's so frightening for me about having a figure like Trump in the White House. The establishments, both Republican and Democrats, over the last few decades have given the ability, whoever sits in it, to flip a switch into a police state.
We have a lot more rights here than many people have in many other countries. Not just Saudi Arabia. You pretty much go anywhere in the Middle East. We have more rights. We have more rights than many people who are living under much more difficult conditions, a lot of it because of U.S. occupation. So I think we have to recognize that the less we use those rights, the less we have them. And it's important, especially at this time, to really exercise the rights that we do have.
So we're at the time where we were going to wrap up audience questions. I just want to check with the panel. Did you want to make closing remarks, or anybody feel? Okay, so
Can I just address this? I mean, I love Medea, but and she's one of the activists I admire most in America, and she has put herself on the line in ways that we should all emulate. No, I'm completely sincere. But the idea that we have rights, the fact is that the way rights are taken from you, if you read Hannah Arendt or any of the great writers on totalitarianism, is that you take them from the vulnerable, the marginal, the demonized first. And what you do is, at that moment, and you walk into any inner city in this country, and those are miniature police states where people live in terror. And I don't use that word lightly, terror. And when she writes in Origins of, she's writing as a stateless person. She's in France. She's been held by the Gestapo for 3 weeks. She's stripped of her German citizenship. And she says that once you create the legal and the physical mechanism to turn rights into privileges, which we have done in our marginal communities, then the moment there is unrest, you have both the legal and the physical mechanism to take those rights from everyone else.
All the more reason for people who have privilege in the society, whether it's by the color of your skin or by your age, because getting older actually gives you a little more rights in vis-a-vis the police, more reason to use them.
I just want to emphasize what I don't want to repeat myself too much, but is anyone here registered to vote not as a Democrat or a Republican, registered under some other party? Very, very wonderful. Thank you all very much. So I'm registered as a Green. I believe everybody should be. It took me a while though, because here in New York we have closed primaries, and unless you're at the party, you don't have any voice in the prime. But I reached the point where I said, never mind, I don't care anymore. So I hope those of you who did not put your hands up change that very, very soon. Thanks.
So just a couple of things. There's a last question, which is for Jill, and then I'll have her. She wants a couple of closing comments if nobody else does. But before that, I will remind people to sign up on the left mailing list. So Jill, what is the Green Party doing to organize at the local electoral level? And then you can, if you have anything to say about that, and then you kind of do your sum up and we'll close out.
Yes.
So there is really a huge upsurge going on in the Green Party right now, and we have lots of new chapters, lots of new people coming in, lots of interest in running at the local level. And we are scrambling as fast as we can to try to help support those candidates. And that means candidate trainings, trainings for treasurers and campaign managers and the things that you need in order to run a campaign. We are trying to set up right now a clearinghouse for tools for candidates, including prototype materials, some best practices in terms of proposals at the local level, from public banking to community gardens to cooperative housing. So we are in the process of developing these tools. We came out of the last election with more fundraising capacity, more organizing capacity than we'd had before, but it's still not anywhere near what we need to be doing. And it's different state by state. I'd say New York is one of the better organized states, and there are people right here that you should come down and talk to if you are interested in running in New York State. And I would say go to the Green Party's website, GPUS, or the Green Party, whatever state you're in, if you are interested in running for local office. We do have some basic tools and support that we can provide, including databases, help with fundraising, and so on. So, just quickly, a couple closing comments. You know, I think there's a lot of diversity of opinion here, and that's totally fine, and that's the way it should be. And I'll say, as a Green, we don't just support establishing the Green Party, we support multi-party democracy. That's the only way to have real democracy. So our interest is not imposing the green stamp on everybody out there, but it is a vehicle that we've got right now, because we've got a lot of work to do before we're going to be a multi-partisan democracy. We're going to have to be have an independent third-party democracy before we get to those reforms that will make it a multi-party democracy. So I just want to encourage people to think about, joining up at whatever level, including Left Elect, which embraces all of the independent, non-corporate political parties. Because, in the words of Alice Walker, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We've got it. Left Elect is about helping us claim that power. Anybody else? Closing comments?
There's going to be a follow-up tomorrow morning, basically continuing the discussion how we can better work together, how we can collaborate. And it's going to be session 5, and the theme there is going to be, and that's going to be on room 1.
We can go to the Green Party table and there's
182. Yeah, 1.82. That's tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for letting me know that. Thank you.
And thank you to Gloria and Mattera for facilitating, and thank you to Linda Lance for organizing this in the first place, and thanks to everybody for coming. All right, go get them.